Welcome to Dash 3.0. Plotly had a recent release of the Dash framework, and with this release, there have been a bunch of changes focused on efficiently allowing the callbacks to focus within the components that they represent, which improves the reaction time of callbacks and components that use those. Alongside that, they've also made a few improvements to the debug toolbar. It looks a little bit different, it functions pretty much the same, but it has a few more bells and whistles to help identify issues that might be happening within your Dash development. So, for example, if your Dash version is out of date, it will notify you and tell you to update to the latest Dash version to help you stay up to date on the latest version of Dash. Outside of that, in this video specifically, we're going to be focusing on how to debug our applications. As we build out these complex dashboards, there are a bunch of issues that are to arise, and to have a plan in place to identify the bugs and issues that you might face, it will expedite your deployment and your development. So with this video, let's talk about some of the tips and tricks I use and you can use to help you speed up your development. So one of the first packages is not directly a Dash package, but I think it's worth addressing because it's really powerful and useful. Now, you can import logging directly if you have Python installed on your operating system by just import logging. Now, with this logging tool, you can set up the base configuration. It's very simple to do. It's about 3 lines. And once you have this established, then you can define logger, as you can see here, and I'm defining it as the name of the file that I'm working within. Now, this is basically identifying that the app.py file is going to be displayed within the format of the logs as they get created. So as you can see within this, it's saying that the main file, which is going to be the app.py file, it has a info log, and it is basically giving it an understanding of the log information. So that is being displayed right here. So with this, there are a few different logs that you can create. You can have an info log for initiation, just saying, hey, all of the imports were successful. And then you can have error or warning logs. So for example, you could just define the same logger that we defined on the variable above, and we could define a error. And this could be used especially in an exception or a way where the callback isn't working in the way that was intended, and it is creating this exception, and you want to display that error log so that in your terminal, you can understand where this is coming from. But for what it is worth, we would want to scroll down to the bottom. Whenever you go to initialize your app, you define it as if name equals main. So that's the reason why we're seeing this main right here, because they are the same. Now, it's just saying that if this is the file, the initialized file app.py, then I want you to run the application. Now, within this, we can define the debug toolbar by just defining debug equals true or debug equals false. And this will allow us to show or hide the debug toolbar. So with this, another thing that I'd like to showcase is if we go back to the app code, I have this example of an error. So I created this section. We're going to update it. And this is going to manually create an error within the application, showcasing how we can see this and resolve it. So as you can see right here, there is a new section and we have an error. And the error is identifying that the value passed in the checklist with the ID bad checklist is expecting an array, which is a list. However, I've given it a string. So if we go back to the code, we can see this in action where this is the new section that I added. And it's saying that the value is expecting an array, but we have given it a string. So if we wrap the string in an array, as I put a list around this, and if I update this, we can see that it will resolve the error that we have faced. So it updates, the error is gone. So as you go about building out callbacks and creating advanced or interactive dashboards, there are going to be errors that arise, but this is a great way for you to identify those errors. Now, I'd like to showcase this a little bit further. I'm going to go over here as I'm going to update the callbacks, and I'm going to add more logging to the application. So we can see the difference between the print statements and the logging itself. So I'm going to save this, and as you can see here, whenever I pull up the terminal in real time, we can see the different logging that is happening, as I have some defined as debug and some defined as info. If I go back into the code, you can see that the debug sections are within the callback themselves, as I am trying to debug the callbacks, where the info logging is in the overall arching application layout. So that just kind of helps you identify where your problems are happening within your code. Now, focusing on this a bit further, you can deploy your application. So after we are done with development, we can refer back to our workspace settings. So I deployed the application and I have a deployment failed. Within the settings, you can go over to the builds and you can see that the build was successful. So the way that the build works is within the application itself, the build is focused within the proc file in the requirements.txt in your Python version, where if the logs themselves fail, then it is referring to something within your overarching application. So it's going to be your app.py file. So it's broken up in two different log sections. One's focused on the server and one is focused on your application. So as you can see here, the build was successful, but the deployment failed. So let's identify why the deployment failed. If we go over to the logs, we can scroll down and we can see that we have a bunch of errors, and we can use this to identify what was wrong. And here it is. There is an attribute error where it says that app server was not defined. So we can go back over to our app code and we can define that. So right below our app initialization, we can basically define the server with server equals app.server. So this was a app problem, and the reason why it was in the logs and not within the build. So the build was successful because the requirements.txt were correct and the proc file that was automatically created with Plotly was correct. But the problem was within the app.py file. So I made these changes, I save the app file, and if I run deploy, then it's going to push the latest changes to the deployment. We could go back over to builds and we can see that a new build has started. As we can see below, the logs will show as they go about it. So it could take a few minutes to get going, but whenever the build is finished, we'll be able to see those logs. And you can click on this button to directly download those logs, and you could view it within a text file to help you search the errors that you are seeing within the logs of the build or the logs of the deployment. So the build and deploy just finished, and we can go to it by clicking on the URL provided, and we can see the application in its entirety. And with this, I can show that if I go back to the workspace, if I go over to logs, we can see that it's giving initial debugging and logging that I provided through the callbacks. And for example, we can see that if we go back to the application as it's live, if we update anything, so I'll just update all these and we can go back to the application. If I refresh, you'll see that these are going to be reflected. So this is the reason why you would want logging within your development, because not only can you see it while you are developing, but in production, you can see these live logs of your live application. And this stays persistent as long as your app is hosted and online. So with this, I hope that this is useful, as debugging can be a subject that isn't the funnest to dive into, but it's a very useful topic to fully understand. So with that, thank you for watching, like, subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.